That's right, folks. We did it. We made the yearly pilgrimage to the Specialty Coffee Expo that this year was hosted in lovely but extremely humid Houston, Texas. So after a couple of whirlwind days of exploring the city, checking out a handful of the local recommended cafes and coffee roasters, seeing some familiar faces, and braving the crowds on the show floor, I achieved my mission of finding my top 5 picks, including a few honorable mentions and one big, I don't know what. So I'll just give you that one now as an appetizer, something to whet your whistle. And I'm talking to you, Akaya, the Umbra, the displayless or screenless scale. I don't understand it. The use cases seem so minimal, and honestly, it just seems like a pet or a emotional support scale for your other Akaya, but I digress. So just think of this video as my version of Oprah's favorite things, just with less yelling. I can't guarantee no yelling, but definitely less. But before we dive into all these new little coffee bits and bobs, we're going to do a quick word from this video's sponsor. Standart Magazine is an independent, coffee-focused quarterly that brings together all the elements of the global coffee community in one place, shining a light on stories and faces, new tech and innovations in the industry, as well as the personal and artistic experience of coffee culture overall. And to sweeten the deal even further, it comes with a sample of coffee from some of the best roasters on the planet. So head on over to standartmag.com/Sprometheus or use code Sprometheus at checkout to snag $5 off your very own subscription of coffee and culture shipped direct to your door nearly anywhere in the world. And if you're still on the fence, you can actually try Standart for just the cost of shipping. There's not much to lose, and there's a whole lot to gain. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I essentially spent the first day on the show floor scouting out my top 5 picks. And as you'd likely expect, all the usual suspects were in attendance with all of their wares. Though surprisingly, in terms of new gear, the pickings were a little slim, and it more or less felt like a copy and paste from the year before. But on day 2, after I had chosen those top 5 pieces, I went back to each respective location or booth and had their representative basically give their full pitch to spit their game, so to speak. And what I'll do is I'll follow up at the end explaining why I picked each one of these items. But I should also say that these aren't really in any sort of order. I just kind of broke them up because, fair warning, it is a bit grinder heavy. But with that, let's dig into the first one.
My name's Josh. I'm at Vision's Espresso Service here, and this is the K's Van der Westen Spiritello. It is their new single group lever machine. It's got brew by pressure, brew by weight, and auto volumetric mode. The fun part about the Spiritello is that it is kind of merging the traditional technology of a lever machine with some new features like those brew by pressure options. So we're going to compress. On the compression, we are pre-infusing right now. So we're going to pre-infuse until we see some drips in the cup. And then we're going to release for the descending pressure profile. Can't promise, the most dialed in shot in the world, but this is kind of what working with the Spiritello lets you do is, you can have that pressure profiling with some of the consistency of the technology that we have today.
So this is the Mini, and this is the Mini G. We launched this in Shanghai last month, and we're going to launch this here in Houston today. This is a time-based on-demand grinder. This is a weight-based on-demand grinder. So we launched Mini back in the 90s. This is a restyling of this product with some nice cool feature. First of all, it's way faster compared to the previous version. 1.5 times as fast as the previous one. And also the way that it falls into the portafilter is nice and fluffy, no clumps. You can switch between portafilter activation and keyboard activation mode. So what I do now is I pre-select my dose. I put it here, push, and it starts grinding. We also redesigned a bit the hopper. We put a nice rubber gasket here to keep the coffee beans fresh. Regarding the Mini G, we're using the same technology as the Cognac G. So there's a scale below the grinder and that weighs and tears the portafilter. Even in this case, I can work either with keyboard or portafilter activation mode. 14 grams. And once it tears, it starts grinding. The target was 14.00. We display the actual dose, and the actual dose was 13.97. It's a very accurate grinder. Standard deviation is 0.08. grams, which means that 70% of doses fall within plus or minus 0.08 grams. Regarding the burrs, it comes factory fitted with the 233 burrs, the ones that are presently on the Super Jolly grinder. But as an option, you can purchase another set of burrs. We haven't decided the name yet, but these are inspired by the i200D from the Philos. So the idea is to provide a burr that a bit more clarity with a nice sweetness. It's very easy to dial in with this one. So maybe a more modern kind of style of coffee.
This is our new and latest R2. And this particular model is a Pro. So there's quite a few changes from the R1 to the R2. Mainly, all the electronics has changed. So we got all new induction electronics under the machine. It's better cooled, it's simplified, it's more accurate. And the electronics for the controller is also brand new. So we got a bunch more sensors. We got humidity sensors built in. We got pressure sensors so that you can see at what elevation you are. We got a new built-in light, which is really fantastic because it's focused directly onto the glass. We had to move the dryer out of the way to get a space for the light. And because of this, we had to move the handle to the left side. That's why it's like this. We also now have an on-off button on the side of the roaster here. And what we focused on is to make everything easier for the roaster. So that means easier to service, easier to maintain. Let me give you an example of that. If you want to do cleaning or have to do cleaning on the machine, there's one screw at the back and everything is detachable and held in place with magnets. Okay. Then we have a small filter here for the IBTS, so that gets less dirty than on the R1. And if you see here, there's no wires at all. Like on the R1, we've removed all the wirings. So you can remove the 6 screws around here and you can pull everything off directly with or without the controller. So that's a major plus. This is a sensor for airflow, which is new on the R2. So what we do is that we can measure the flow inside of the pipe here. And we can automatically adjust the fan speed based on the pressure. So that means even your chaff collector gets dirty, and I mean completely clogged up, you will still have the same airflow in the machine while you're roasting. And it will then tell you on the display that it's time for you to empty the chaff. And then we have the cooling tray. So we have 2 models now. We have the standard R2 and then we have the R2 Pro. R2 Pro is only 200 volt, 220 volt, 240, and comes with a increase in power. So we get up to 2300 watts, which means you can roast 1.2 kilo in around 6 minutes to first crack. And it also comes with this Pro cooling tray, which has got a built-in stirrer. It's got a more powerful fan. And if you look here on the side, we've got a much bigger filter that is detachable with magnets. So you can basically be roasting all day without having to empty that filter. And then we got the stir function, which is controlled by the controller as well. And we got the latch so that you can put it back directly onto it here. So there's like hundreds of small changes, but the main takeaway is easier maintenance and more consistency and more power.
This is the Encore ESP Pro. This is sort of an upgrade of the Encore ESP that we created a couple of years ago. To start with, if you see, you have the backlit display here, which is sort of similar to like the Virtuoso Plus. You've got a knob which adjusts your time, and as indicated here, you have a little clock which tells you you're in time mode, but it can also single dose as well. So if you want to put it in single dose mode, you just hold the button down for 4 seconds, the time indicator goes away, and so now you're left with this number which indicates your grind setting. As you can see, there's no more numbers on the front here, there's just a dial, and as you turn the hopper, you get movement here. It's got a potentiometer, and this is now a stepless grinder, so there's no more detent clicking or anything like that. There are 60 settings. There are also half settings in between those as well. All of our conical series have a 180 degree adjustment. This one has a 270 degree adjustment. And in the espresso range, which is from 0 to 40, every degree of movement of the adjustment ring gives you 2.2 microns of vertical burr movement. So a lot more adjustability and resolution, if you will, in the espresso range, so you can really actually dial in. Whenever it's not in ESP mode, you'll come up in your settings here. Once you pass 40, that indicator will go off, which tells you you're out of the espresso range. So now you're in that range of like filter or AirPress or whatever you want to do there. And that's from 41 all the way up to 60. So we'll just lift this off. This is like an anodized adjustment collar here. And as you see, there's just some indications of your grind setting. There's a quick release knob here that you can turn to remove. We'd also added a flow control disc as well to slow the flow of coffee coming in, so you're not getting so much traffic backup whenever you are grinding your coffee. And then the ring burr holder, like all of our grinders, comes out, but this one has a little arm on it, so now you can just lift it right out of place whenever you need to get in there to clean. And then just like the ESP, this is just a quick release burr that pops out, and then you can get into the grind chamber as well. Otherwise, things you can't see, there's a new drive gear system that interfaces better with our motor, which helps with sound and also helps with the overall alignment of the grinder. There's also some anti-static features. The shaft also got an upgrade too. There are some baffles in here which help to break up clumps as well. So you're going to get a more fluffy espresso, hopefully less having to do prep and stuff like that. There's an auto shut off now, so as soon as you're done grinding your coffee, it'll read that you no longer have coffee grinding and it'll automatically shut off. And then obviously if you have the hopper in place, you'll want to put it in time mode, holding down for 4 seconds. Now we're back in time mode, and we can adjust our time to grind, just like the Virtuoso Plus.
All right, so that's the Z2. This is the very first prototype that we've actually shared live. It's not released yet, so it's going to release later this year. It's an 80 mil grinder, 80 mil burr grinder. So this one is going to feature something like the Bitting 804s, the machine steel burrs. Actually, that's the pair I was just messing with. They're super nice burrs. The interesting thing about the 80 mil burrs is that the interior diameter of the burr is small, and the exterior is big. Basically, this is what they look like next to a 64. So you get a lot more cutting area. And the geometries are very interesting. They're a completely different set of geometries than the 64, so there's going to be a lot more for users to explore. So that's kind of the cool thing. That's why I decided to go with 80 mil instead of something like the 83 mil. Because the 83 mil burrs, they're very similar to the 64. They're just bigger. Now this thing has been completely redesigned on the inside. You're going to notice first that the funnel is on the front piece here, and then the chute is on the back piece, versus the Z1 where the funnel is on the back, the chute is on the front. So we ended up switching the rotor and the stationary burrs. So it's going to make it a little easier to clean than the Z1 since there's no pre-breaker to take out. The grind chamber shape is updated, and also the position of the wipers is updated on the pre-breaker. So you end up with a really clean grind chamber. Another thing is we do actually have a little knocker over here. If you take a look, you can see that the chute has two parts. It has an outside jacket and an inside piece. And the inside piece goes all the way up to the burrs. So basically, when you use the knocker, that's actually gonna knock everything that is in the grind chamber. So you can still set your 0 in the exact same way you do it on the Z1. But it has been changed and updated. Actually, you can take the knob off, and there's 3 springs that you can use to adjust the tension on your knob. So you can make it a little heavier or a little lighter on this one, which I think it's going to be an interesting feature. It has a purge feature. So this is a 3-position switch. Up is on, so you start your grind. And then when you're done with your grind, you can push it all the way down. This is going to turn on the purge feature. Your burrs are going to start spinning really quickly around 1800 RPM. Purge the grounds, you can let it go, and this is the off position.
All right, so first, but as I said in no particular order, the Keys Van der Westen Spiritello. And if you have been following me for this year, whether it be on Instagram or here on YouTube, obviously I've been dubbing this year the year of the lever. So a lever had to make the list. And I've been looking at this machine, sharing pictures of this every time they share it on Keys Instagram page, because it's just such a beautiful piece. And then you look at the modernization of the lever. Don't get me wrong, I love the simplicity of the one behind me. It's got a spring and that's basically it. But this one has a rotary pump, it has pre-infusion, you can adjust the pressure on, it has a stop button, which means even if the spring is still compressing, you can actually stop the shot. You can also flush it with a button as opposed to having to pull the lever down. There's just so many bits and pieces that really make that machine special. But also, they said the price tag was around $16,000 to $17,000, and I'm thinking that's probably base because when I look it up online, I've seen prices closer to 21. So it's a bit rich for my blood. That's going into my retirement Porsche fund. So, that is what it is, but it's a beautiful piece of equipment, and that is why it made the list. The next one up in line is the Mazzer Mini G. Now, Mazzer for me is a brand that is very nostalgic. My first espresso grinder was a Mazzer. I guess it was rebranded to a La Marzocco Lux D, but it was essentially a modified Mazzer Mini. And it's just, when I saw that they came out with a new one, I was immediately drawn to it just because it just brings back those memories of when I first got my Mazzer and I first got my La Marzocco, and I was kind of just enjoying it for what it was, right? It's just a simpler time sort of experience. But also looking at what Mazzer is doing now with the Philos that I had recently, they're trying to really modernize their brand in a way, but also doing it in a way that doesn't forget their past. I just really respect Mazzer overall for that. And the build quality of Mazzers is always just insane. I mean, most of them just last forever. They're tanks. And even the ones in the video, they looked great to me, but he even said that they were 3D printed prototypes. And there is some small tweaks and changes that are going to happen before they come out with the full model. But they just, they looked great. They looked nostalgic. They functioned really well. As he showed, they were pretty accurate in terms of the grind by weight, which is something that I wanted to see on the Mazzer Mini. And I think, they're listening to their customers. They're coming into the, current day modern espresso realm with new burr sets that are more aimed at, modern espresso, but they're also not forgetting their past. So thumbs up for the Mazzer Mini G. And of course, who can forget the Alio Bullet? Now, I had the R1 way back when I was doing my roasting business, and I loved that machine. Absolutely loved it. That was probably one of the hardest ones to sell and let go of just because it was just that good. I don't know if you watched my review of it sometime back. Roasting is obviously something that's more of a specialized angle for coffee. Not everyone is going to drop that money on a roaster. And I ended up selling it to a friend of mine. So it stayed close. It stayed within the family, I guess. And she's roasting her own coffee on it for her business. And that's great. But having a chance to look at the R2, again, just flooded me with that nostalgia of rolling it out onto my porch and roasting in the open air. And it was just such a good machine. The new one, they didn't really change things that didn't need to get changed. They really simplified it. They made it bigger a little bit. They made it stronger, more powerful, bigger filters. And for me, I think the one thing I really didn't like about the original, and of course it didn't really matter because I wasn't doing like large batches generally speaking, but having a agitator or a stirrer in the cooling tray, I mean, chef's kiss. It just looks so cool. It looks so good. I think they only did things that they needed to do. I think oftentimes when people do a version 2 or move on to something else in that same like naming convention with a bullet, for instance, they sometimes would just go overboard and go too far from the original. I think this does just enough and it's perfect. All right, next up on the list is the Barista Encore ESP Pro. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, again, there is a level of nostalgia here because the Barista Encore was my very first coffee grinder ever, just before the Mazzer Mini. So there is a level of nostalgia here, but I can say, having had a Barista now for what, 9 years, or so, maybe 10 years. It's been flawless. And I now have multiple Barazzas. I have the original ESP. And are they perfect grinders? No. But I don't think they're really designed to be, that end game coffee nerd, intense grinder. They're intended to be maybe a stepping stone for some people, their first grinder. Most people I talk to, the Encore was their first grinder, or something for someone who doesn't really see themselves going down the rabbit hole and just wants something that's reliable and works well and is honestly pretty well supported in the back end in terms of being repairable and maintainable for something that is relatively inexpensive. So when it comes to the ESP Pro, it does seem like they've listened to the feedback from the users on the ESP. I think one of the main issues that I had is just a lack of controllability in the espresso range. So they've definitely worked on that. And I think, getting rid of some of the issues that the Encore has had since the very beginning, trying to make it quieter, trying to make it less staticky, I do think those are all steps in the right direction. And I think that's probably where it should stop, because I think if you keep going further and further down and it gets more and more expensive, I think at $300, you're kind of pushing that upper end of what people are looking to pay for their entry into coffee grinding, at least electric coffee grinding. So, that's just my take on that. But I do think the ESP Pro is a solid catch, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting my hands on one of those in the near future. And the last, but certainly not least of the 5 picks, the Zerno Z2. Now, I have the Zerno Z1 here, which is a 64 millimeter flat burr grinder. The Z2 is a 80 millimeter flat burr grinder, so it's definitely a step up in terms of size, in terms of cutting area on the burr itself, as Val mentioned in the video. So it's definitely a change and move forward. I think they also have RPM control on there, which I don't know if that actually came up in the actual recording, but that's another addition to the mix. So I think that's going to be one to watch. I do really like my Zerno. I haven't done a full review on it quite yet because I wanted to really put some serious time into it. And really, if I come out with one after James Hoffman does anyone really care anyway? So I'm just going to do it when I feel like I want to do it. But with that said, Zerno Z2 looks great. Really curious to see the burr options, because I don't know how readily available 80 millimeter burrs are. And when I asked Val about the choice to go 80 instead of 83, because I just see more options in 83, he said really it's just about having some more unique burr sets, because the 83 options essentially are the same as the 64. So that'll make sense to me, but I am looking forward to seeing more of that grinder. And finally, let's talk honorable mentions and updates. So of course, honorable mentions are pieces of equipment I saw at the show that drew me in, but didn't quite make that top level, top 5 grouping. So the first one is the 9 Barista Pro. Now, if you remember the 9 Barista from my review some time ago, like a year ago or so now, that has been a very cool piece of coffee kit. It made really good shots, really consistent. Of course, there's not a ton of controllability there, but in terms of a really hot-rodded mocha pot, I mean, I don't even like saying it mocha pot in the same sentence because it's just so different. It makes true solid espresso shots. So I do plan on doing more with that piece of equipment, maybe even getting the 9 Barista Pro for a side-by-side and maybe do some tests with that. But that one is very cool, worth a look. They did some updating on the internals with some ceramic, removing plastic, and using something that's a cleaner material. So it's not cast anymore. It's a much smoother piece. So all in all, very cool. Love it. Looking forward to seeing more of it. Also, the Passato, I think that's how you say it, diffusion screen. Now, I can't use it on any of the machines that I have, but I looked closely at it, saw it in action on the Mavam at the Mavam booth where they had it installed next to one that didn't have it. There's a definite difference, and shower screens is one of those sides of espresso that I think hasn't seen a ton of attention until recently, so I'm hoping that maybe that's something we'll see more down the road. But the overall spread, diffusion, consistency, whatever you want to call it, of the water droplets, does intrigue me. If I have a machine at some point that I can use that on, 100% will do that. I asked them if they had it for the Pro 800. They don't, because it's that traditional, like almost looks like a basket E61 style. So there's no diffusion screw in that one, but very cool piece of kit. Looking forward to seeing more people using it, talking about it, and seeing what the general consensus is on it, because it's not something that I don't think I can actually use here. And last but not least, the other one is the Breville Oracle dual boiler. Sorry, I had to check my notes. They reached out on Instagram over between the first and second days of the show and said, hey, come by. We want to show you our new thing. Asked for Matt. Went up, talked to Matt. He showed me this new machine. And honestly, it has the standard Breville look to it, which honestly is not my favorite aesthetic. But it does have some interesting features that are pretty unique and I don't think I've heard of before. There actually is no grind adjustment on the unit. It sort of knows how your shot is running and grinds accordingly, which is interesting. Don't ask me how you dial in. That's something that I don't see how that would work, but maybe it guesses based on row state. I have no clue. That's a question I probably should have asked, but I didn't think of it in the moment. But overall, it just is kind of an interesting piece of equipment. I think the price point's pretty high at like $3,000, but I think the other Oracle is close to that. But it is dual boiler, so there is that option as well. I mean, Breville, I think, has paid their dues more or less. I know that there's a lot of conversation about plastic machines, repairability, and I do think that the Breville does kind of get pulled back a bit in that. I have heard stories about people who haven't been able to repair them, had to send them in, or when they break, they're essentially gone. But I have heard people who say that they can repair them or they do repair them. So, jury's still out on that. But I do think they've been around long enough to where I trust the tech and the, whole program behind the Breville machines. So, I'm not saying I love it, but I am curious about it. So if they send me one, I'll definitely be giving it a full once over. But I think that is more or less the honorable mentions. But speaking of plastic machines, I should just do a quick update about my previous video that I'm not sure if everyone saw it on the Fellow ES1. So I did a quick reaction talking about my opinions, my take on that machine, the technology behind it, etc. And my main concern is build quality. As I mentioned with the Brevilles, I want to know that I can open it up and repair something. Essentially, how DIY-able is it? And, I think that the folks at Fellow, they did offer me an invitation to come look at it. I had looked at it the day before. I came back, spoke to their head engineer, and we kind of just left it at where I was before. They had 5 machines there, only one that they told me was pulling shots, but they didn't want to open up the machine. And it wasn't because it was proprietary or patent pending. They said it was just too much of a hassle to open it up.
It's not because we don't want people to see it. We're already pretty open about everything.
Okay.
But yeah, man.
And then what's the time frame?
I just want to let you know we're not going to take it apart.
I mean, you can't even pull off a side panel or a top?
Because in order to take the panel off, we actually use this as part of the structure.
Okay.
You got to take screws out of the bottom, then you got to take screws out of the top, and everything's completely encoded. It takes about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to get everything open.
Which again is kind of a point against DIY. Most machines, a top panel is maybe 4 screws at most. So I don't know. We're kind of left at an impasse there. It's, like I said, it looks good. I saw it pull Espresso. People seem to like it. I still have my questions on build quality and longevity, and that's essentially where we're at. But on that note, I think it's time I start wrapping this one up. And as always, pass the conversation on to you. So what are your thoughts about all the products I showed and highlighted from the SCA? What are you most excited about? What are you looking forward to me reviewing? What would you like to see more of on the channel or just in general? Drop your answers to those questions and any others you may have in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications when new videos drop. Check out my Instagram at Sprometheus for more coffee content. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for exclusive access. And as always, stay caffeinated. Pony Boy.